all that paper.
So it's only been 2 days since the election, but executives and CEOs are already reaching out to the administration, agreeing with President Obama's message. It is time to work together to rebuild our economy. Sure. Seb, what can you really do now that hasn't been tried already? Businesses now have to deal with the very real possibility of higher taxes and expenses, and the president has to make it easier to do business here in the U.S., right? All right, we have assembled a panel to sort through all of this. Ed Conrad is a former Bain Capital Managing Director, the author of Unintended Consequences. It's right there. Clint Greenleaf is the founder and CEO of Greenleaf Book Group. Thanks for coming back. And we also have Jim Amos. He's the CEO of frozen yogurt chain Tasty Delight. My favorite. I love it. All right. Thanks to all of you guys for joining us. Let's dive right in. What do you think that, Clint, let me start with you. I mean, you're one of those folks that ahead of the election thought that it was going to be really difficult to get business rolling again with the president in office. He's there. Here we are. We've got to start making money. What do you think can be done?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is all out a collective aw shucks moment and say, okay, didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, but now here we have this new reality, right? We've got to look and say, we still want to make money. We still want to be able to run businesses. So how do we structure our businesses with a new tax climate? That's going to mean a lot of game playing. It means a lot of money for lawyers and accountants as we figure out how to structure investments, employment, that sort of thing, in order to make sure that we don't open ourselves up to new liability in the coming years.
Yeah. Ed, one of the things that I heard was that what we needed was certainty. You know, that it wasn't really about who was in charge. It was knowing what the climate was going to be going forward. Well, now we have certainty. So how does that help you plan?
I don't think certainty is going to be the biggest factor here. I think that when you balance, we're running a $1.1 trillion a year deficit. You can run about $200 billion a year, and debt as a percent of GDP won't be growing. We got to close $900 billion. The certainty around that, it doesn't matter. The tax increases that are required and the spending reduction that's required to bring this back into balance over the long term is going to have a big impact on the economy.
But Jim, you say the bottom line is that it's a bad time for business, but you're still a successful businessman with many, many stores all over the place. What are you going to do right now to move forward?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? It appears to me that I don't know how anything has changed particularly pre or post-election. I mean, people talk about status quo, the issues, the uncertainty that's just been mentioned, the issues with facing the fiscal cliff in the long term, the uncertainty around taxes in general at corporate rates, incoherent energy policies.
I know, but you're a successful guy. You're not going to roll over and play dead. You're going to get out there and win. I know you. You have a successful business. How are you going to do it?
No, listen, no one is going to roll over and play dead today any more than they did before. I think the issue is one is practical and one is philosophical. The practical issue is that you have to make your way. If you're facing Obamacare and you know you have an employer mandate and you have people that are going to have another $6.4 billion in burden, both in infrastructure on top of business, and we're facing on the franchising side losing about 3.2 million jobs as a result of it, you have to respond. Part of that response, I think, as we've learned in this election, is just not the practical matter of fixing these things, but from the business community's perspective, finally responding to the shrill rhetoric that's coming out of Washington and saying, look, it's time for business to make the moral and ethical case for business as a moral enterprise. It used to be a positive thing to be in business in the United States of America today. And now it's rather pejorative if one stops and thinks about it. It seems to me we've lost the education element of this for a lot of people, and it's time for us to take it back.
But Clint, you know, at the end of the day, that's the philosophical side, and you've got to talk about the practical side. We have to run our businesses. We have to make money. We have to feed our families. We have to have a roof over our head. How are you going to do that? I mean, are you just going to hire more part-time workers because of the way the rules of the game have been set out? Are you going to outsource more? What do you do?
Yeah, I think 1099 is going to be the buzzword of 2013. We're going to find ways to outsource just about every job function that we can. I'm at about 40-ish employees right now. And come hell or high water, I'm not going above that 50 threshold. I'm going to make sure I stay below that. So I'm going to outsource more. I'm also going to keep an eye on capital expenditures. If they're going to get rid of the Section 179 exemption, that's going to cut my expenses down as well. So I'm going to be a lot more careful, guard my cash.
Yeah, Ed, what do you think? I mean, does that make sense? We're going to see businesses do all that.
I think you're going to see businesses hunker down. And I think the resolution of the fiscal cliff is not going to cause businesses to stop hunkering down.
Why?
I think it's going to be because when you spend the money, you've already incurred the taxes. It doesn't matter whether you borrow or not. And so when government spending goes up, the private sector goes down. And when government spending comes down, and it might come down a bit here, the private sector is going to be very leery about ramping up until they see real reductions because they've never seen the government cut before. And they can't ramp up that quickly. They're going to ramp up cautiously.
Yeah.
And that means that we're going to go through a recession as we try to transition to a more sustainable model, one that has a $200 billion a year deficit instead of a $1.1 trillion. They kicked the can down the road, and now we got to deal with it now. It's going to be tough.
Jim, I'll give you the last word. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree in this sense. The reaction of business in terms of hunkering down, as an example in franchising, if you have a franchisee sitting out there wanting to sign a 10 or 20-year agreement and he doesn't know what his tax rate is going to be in 2 months, much less 2 years, he struggles with that. So what do? We lower the overhead cost of entry. We try to find somebody that'll lend to people that hasn't been lending for the last 4 years. You make adjustments, but I would suggest to you that's not a rapid recipe for growth.
Yes.
Much less scaling with some deal of robustness.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And coming up on Money, investors are singing